The sun was low in the sky when the tide pulled back from the coast. Waves left behind trails of foam that sparkled like silver under the evening light. The small coastal town rested quietly where the desert met the ocean. From a distance, the dunes looked like golden mountains, always shifting, always alive with the wind. The people who lived here often said the desert had its own voice. When the wind blew strongly, it whispered stories that only the patient could hear. Among the townsfolk was a group of explorers. They were not treasure hunters or fortune seekers. They were people who wanted to learn about the past. Their leader was a calm and thoughtful man named Rami. He believed that every grain of sand carried memory. His friends Hana, Omar, and Lena often joined him in small discoveries along the shore. They had found seashells buried in the desert and ancient pottery pieces scattered near the cliffs. These little findings had always filled them with curiosity. One morning, after a heavy storm, Rami and his friends walked along the shoreline. The storm had been strong, and the waves had eaten away a large part of the beach. Piles of seaweed and driftwood were scattered everywhere, but something else caught their eyes. Near the edge of the water, partly buried in wet sand, stood a block of carved stone. Its surface was smooth, unlike the natural rocks around it. Symbols covered its sides. Some lines looked like birds, while others looked like waves. Rami bent down to brush off the sand. His hand shook slightly as he whispered to the others, "This is no ordinary stone. This was shaped by people long ago." The group grew quiet. Each one leaned closer. Hana gently traced a symbol with her finger. "This looks like the mark of an ancient kingdom," she said. Omar tilted his head, noticing that the carving seemed to tell a story. "It speaks of water and sand," he murmured. Lena's eyes widened. Could it be part of something larger beneath us? The thought sent shivers of excitement through them. For generations, townsfolk had spoken of old legends. There were stories about a pharaoh who once ruled both the desert and the sea. The elders said his palace had been swallowed by the waves and buried under shifting sands. Few believed these tales, yet the stone in front of them felt like a whisper from that forgotten time. The explorers decided to bring the stone fragment to their study room in town. The room was small, with maps pinned to the walls and shelves full of notes. Oil lamps lit the space with a soft glow. They placed the stone on a wooden table, wiping away the salt and sand. As they examined the carvings more closely, they noticed shapes of boats sailing on waves next to long lines of pyramids rising from the desert. Rami spoke in a quiet but steady voice. "The legend said the pharaoh wanted to rule land and sea. This carving seems to confirm it. If his palace truly lies beneath the waves, then this stone is just the beginning." The others listened carefully. Hana suggested that the storm might have shifted sand and water, revealing parts of what had been hidden. Omar agreed, adding that there could be more fragments waiting to be uncovered along the shore. Lena pointed out that the markings looked too deliberate to be random decoration. They were telling a message, though the full meaning was still unclear. As night deepened, they stepped outside. The desert air was cool, and the sound of the ocean carried across the dunes. The moonlight made the waves shimmer like polished silver. Rami felt a sense of connection, as if the past was reaching out across centuries. He thought of the pharaoh whose name was lost but whose dream had been preserved in stone. The next morning, the explorers went to speak with the elders of the town. The elders were keepers of memory, passing down stories that had no written record. One elder, named Yusuf, was known for his calm wisdom. He listened carefully as the group described their discovery. When they placed the stone before him, his old eyes glowed with recognition. "This is the mark of the pharaoh beneath the sands," Yusuf said. "My grandfather told me tales of him. He was not only a ruler but also a seeker of balance. He believed the desert was the body of the earth and the ocean was its breath. He built his palace to honor both, but nature claimed it back. It has slept for ages under the tides." The explorers leaned in closer. Hana asked softly, "Do you believe it still exists, waiting for us to find it?" Yusuf nodded slowly. "The desert hides many things, but the sea hides more. Storms do not only destroy, they also uncover what time has hidden. If you listen to the desert's voice and watch the rhythm of the ocean, you may find the path." The words filled the group with wonder. They returned to the shoreline that evening, watching as the sun dipped behind the dunes. The ocean was calm again, but the carved stone stood as a silent reminder of mysteries still buried. As the waves rolled gently, Rami felt certain this was only the first step. The palace of the pharaoh might still be waiting beneath the sands, and it was now calling to those who were ready to listen. The desert wind carried a long sigh across the shore, as if agreeing with his thought. The journey had begun. The next day, the explorers gathered once again in their small study room. The carved stone they had found lay at the center of the wooden table. Its surface gleamed faintly under the morning light that came through the window. Around it, maps, scrolls, and old notes were scattered. Each of them was eager to understand the meaning hidden in the symbols. Rami studied the carvings with calm eyes. He traced the lines of the boats and the pyramids. "These markings tell us something important," he said. "They are not only decoration. They are instructions or a memory." Hannah leaned over the table and tapped a section where waves seemed to rise toward the sky. "Look at this," she said. "It almost looks like the sea is reaching for the desert. Maybe it shows how the Pharaoh wanted to bring both worlds together." Omar nodded thoughtfully. He was the most practical among them, always looking for clues and small details. "If this is part of a larger picture, then there might be more stones scattered nearby," he said. The storm uncovered this one so others could be hidden along the coast or under shallow water. Lena sat quietly for a while, her eyes fixed on the patterns. Then she spoke softly. "Do you remember what Elder Youssef said? That the Pharaoh believed the desert was the body of the earth and the ocean was its breath. Maybe these symbols are not just art. Maybe they are his way of leaving a message across time." The room grew silent as her words settled in their minds. It felt as though the Pharaoh himself was whispering to them from a forgotten age. Later that afternoon, they decided to visit Youssef again. The elder was sitting outside his home, watching the children of the town play in the sand. When he saw the explorers approach, he welcomed them warmly. "We need to hear more of the stories," Rami said respectfully. "The stone has stirred questions we cannot answer on our own." Youssef nodded. His voice was slow and steady as he began. "Long ago, when the kingdom was strong, the Pharaoh was unlike other rulers. He did not seek only wealth or power. He sought to understand the bond between people and nature. He built his palace close to the meeting place of desert and sea. Some say it was partly above water and partly below, a wonder of its time. But storms grew fierce and the palace sank into the ocean. The Pharaoh ordered that his wisdom be carved in stone so that one day when the world was ready it could be found." Hannah listened carefully. "Do the stories say where the palace lies?" Youssef looked out toward the horizon where the dunes touched the waves. "The stories say it is hidden where sand and water embrace each other. Not deep in the sea, but not fully on land either. It is a place that changes with the tide." The explorers exchanged glances. Omar whispered, "That means we must search along the shifting line between the desert and the ocean." Lena asked another question. "Did the Pharaoh leave behind treasures?" Youssef smiled gently. "Not treasures of gold or jewels. His treasure was knowledge. He believed wisdom was the true gift for the future. That is why he left his words in stone. His greatest hope was that one day people would find his palace and learn from him." The explorers thanked Youssef and left with hearts full of determination. They knew now that their journey was not only about solving a mystery, it was about honoring a legacy meant for all of humanity. That evening they gathered by the shore once again. The sea was calm, and the setting sun painted the sky in shades of orange and gold. The carved stone still rested near their study room, but in their minds its symbols grew larger. Rami spread out a map on the sand. "We need to mark the places where storms strike hardest," he said. "The waves there might have uncovered more remains." Omar pointed to a section of the coastline where the cliffs curved inward. "The tides here are strong," he said. "If the palace was nearby, parts of it could still be hidden under shallow water." Hannah added, "And if the palace was meant to touch both desert and sea, then it cannot be far from the shore. We must search the borders carefully." The plan was set. They would use simple tools to explore the coastline, and if possible, they would borrow scanning equipment from the nearby port. The thought of entering the water to search did not frighten them. Instead, it filled them with excitement. As night came, they sat together by a small fire near the dunes. The flames flickered in the wind, casting moving shadows on their faces. Lena looked toward the horizon and said quietly, "Do you ever wonder why we are the ones to find this? Out of all the people, why us?" Rami answered with a calm smile. "Perhaps the Pharaoh wanted to be found by those who would listen to his wisdom with respect, not by those who would only seek riches. We were chosen because we look for meaning, not for gold." The fire crackled softly and the group fell silent. Each of them carried the same feeling in their hearts. They were no longer just explorers. They were part of a story that had begun long before their time. Far away, the waves rolled gently under the moonlight. The ocean seemed to breathe slowly, as if holding secrets it was not yet ready to reveal. The explorers knew their path would not be simple, but their curiosity burned brighter than fear. They were ready to follow the whispers of the past. The morning sun rose over the desert, painting the dunes in soft shades of gold. The ocean waves sparkled under the light, calm after days of restless tides. Rami and his friends stood by the shore with quiet determination. Today was the day they would step beyond the beach and into the waters that guarded the Pharaoh's secret. They had prepared for weeks. With help from the port town nearby, they borrowed simple diving gear and a small boat. The gear was not advanced, but it would allow them to stay under the water long enough to explore the seabed near the shifting dunes. Along with the gear, they carried waterproof maps and tools to mark locations. Each one of them carried a sense of responsibility, knowing they were not only exploring but also protecting the memory of a forgotten age. Rami gave a steady look to his friends as they loaded the boat. "We must stay close to each other," he said. "The sea is not like the desert. It changes without warning. We will move slowly and carefully." Hana nodded, tying her hair back and checking her gear. "If the palace is here, we will find its first stones today," she said with quiet hope. Omar placed a compass and a set of markers in a small waterproof pouch. "We will mark the path as we go," he added. "That way we will not lose our way in the water." Lena looked toward the horizon. "The Pharaoh's voice waits beneath the waves," she whispered. "Let us listen well." The boat pushed away from the shore. The town grew smaller as the explorers moved toward the curve of the coastline where the cliffs met the ocean. The water shifted from light green near the shore to a deep blue further out. The wind was gentle and the sound of gulls echoed above. When they reached the chosen spot, Rami gave the signal. One by one, they adjusted their masks and lowered themselves into the water. The world above faded, replaced by a new and quiet realm. Beneath the surface, sunlight streamed down in golden shafts. Schools of fish swam in graceful patterns, moving around rocks and corals. The explorers descended carefully, keeping close to each other. With every stroke, the water grew cooler and the silence deeper. Then they saw it. Rising from the seabed were shapes that did not belong to nature. Massive stone pillars stood upright, though many were covered in coral and sea plants. Their surfaces were smooth and straight, too precise to be random formations. The explorers exchanged wide-eyed glances through their masks. Hana swam closer to one pillar. She brushed away a patch of sand and revealed carved lines. The shapes were faint but recognizable. They were the same symbols that had been carved into the stone found on the shore. Omar pointed to the base of the pillar, where smaller stones lay in a neat row. "This is not a single pillar," he thought to himself. "This is part of a gate." Lena placed her hand against the pillar with reverence. Through the glass of her mask, her eyes shone with wonder. It was as though the Pharaoh had built this structure to wait for them, hidden under centuries of tides. Rami swam a little further and discovered two more pillars standing in parallel. Between them lay a path leading into deeper water, partly buried under drifting sand. He motioned for the others to join him. Together they floated before the passage, staring into the mystery that stretched beyond. It was not just a ruin. It was an entrance. The group stayed close, following the stone path. Small fish darted in and out of the cracks. Seaweed swayed like banners in the current. Each step forward felt like stepping into another world, a world where the past had chosen to sleep. At one point, Hana turned her light toward the sand and noticed patterns carved into the floor. They formed waves and stars, as if the ground itself was telling a story. The explorers paused to study the designs. The carvings were not random. They showed people standing between pyramids and oceans, lifting their arms to the sky. "This is it," Rami thought silently. The Pharaoh's vision of unity, carved into stone so it would never be lost. They marked the place with a floating buoy so they could return easily. Then they continued further until the seabed sloped downward. Ahead of them, they glimpsed the outline of a great wall half buried in sand. Coral had grown across its surface, but the size and shape were unmistakable. It was no natural cliff. It was the wall of a structure. Lena's heart raced as she pointed toward an opening in the wall. It was an arched doorway, still intact after all these years. The currents flowed gently through it, carrying bits of sand that sparkled in the light. The explorers hovered in front of the doorway. None of them spoke, but in their eyes was the same thought. They had found the entrance to the Pharaoh's submerged palace. They did not go inside yet. The light was fading, and their air would not last long. Rami signaled for them to return. Reluctantly, they turned back along the path, leaving markers as they went. When they surfaced, the sky was painted with the colors of sunset. They climbed back into the boat, pulling off their masks. For a long moment, they simply sat in silence, breathing deeply, their faces filled with awe. Finally, Hana broke the silence. "We found it," she said softly. "The palace is real." Omar smiled, though his voice trembled with excitement. "And we have only seen the gates. Who knows what waits inside?" Lena's eyes shone as she looked back at the horizon. "The Pharaoh's words are waiting for us," she said. "We must return and uncover them." Rami placed his hand on the side of the boat. "Yes," he said firmly, "but we must go with respect. This is not only history. This is a gift left for us to guard." As the boat moved back toward the town, the last light of day shimmered on the waves. Beneath those waves, the submerged palace waited, silent and patient, holding secrets from an age when desert and ocean had been one. The next morning, the explorers gathered again by the shore. The memory of the great stone pillars in the doorway beneath the sea filled their hearts with excitement. They had touched the edge of the Pharaoh's palace, but they knew that true discovery waited inside. Rami checked the diving gear carefully, making sure each mask, tank, and light was ready. "We will take our time today," he said with steady calm. "What we saw yesterday was only the beginning. If we enter the palace, we must move slowly and leave no harm behind." Hana carried a waterproof notebook and small tools. She wanted to record every detail they might find. Omar prepared extra markers and ropes to guide their way through the chambers. Lena packed a small waterproof case for samples. None of them spoke much. The silence was filled with quiet respect for the task ahead. The boat slid across the morning waters until they reached the buoy they had left behind. The ocean was calm, as though it too was waiting for them to return. With careful movements, they entered the water and descended once more into the shimmering blue. The stone pillars greeted them like silent guardians. Fish swam in bright colors around the carvings. The explorers followed the marked path until the great wall of the palace came into view. The doorway stood open, half covered in drifting sand, but strong enough to have survived countless storms. Rami shone his light into the dark opening. He turned to his friends and they nodded. Together they entered the Pharaoh's palace. Inside, the water grew still, as though the walls had created a shelter from the current. The first chamber stretched wide, its floor covered with patterns of waves and stars. The walls were decorated with murals, though coral and sea plants had grown across many of them. When Hana brushed gently at the surface, she revealed painted figures. They showed men and women planting seeds, sailing boats, and watching the stars above. "These are not images of war or power," Hana thought. "These are images of life." Lena floated beside another wall and gasped softly. The mural there showed a vast palace rising between dunes and sea waves. Its towers reached for the sky and its foundations sank into the water. It was the Pharaoh's vision, carved and painted to last through time. Omar pointed to a line of symbols that ran along the edges of the murals. They were the same as those found on the stone from the shore. He took out a waterproof slate and began sketching the shapes carefully. He wanted to preserve every mark before time washed it away. The explorers swam deeper into the chamber, following a narrow passage. The passage opened into another hall, this one filled with massive stone columns. Some had fallen, but others still stood tall, covered in carvings of stars and flowing rivers. The ceiling above was cracked, and beams of sunlight streamed through, creating patterns of gold on the floor. It was as if the palace was still alive, breathing through the light that reached it. Rami felt a strong sense of wonder. He placed his hand on one of the columns. "This is not just stone," he thought. "This is memory carved into shape." In the next chamber, they found something even more remarkable. The walls were filled with symbols that looked like maps of the sky. Stars were connected with lines, forming patterns of constellations. Hana's eyes widened behind her mask. The Pharaoh studied the heavens, she realized. He wanted his palace to be a mirror of the stars above. Lena swam closer and noticed another set of carvings below the star maps. These showed waves carrying small boats across the sea. Above the boats, people raised their hands toward the stars. It seemed to tell a story of balance between land, sea, and sky. The explorers paused to take in the meaning. The pharaoh had not built his palace for riches or display. He had built it as a temple of knowledge, a place where future generations could learn the harmony between people and nature. As they explored, they noticed that many chambers were connected by archways, forming a labyrinth of history. Some rooms were partly filled with sand, while others were open and bright with beams of light. Small creatures swam through the ruins, adding life to the silent halls. Omar tied ropes along the path so they could find their way back. He worked carefully, always mindful not to damage the ancient stones. Rami guided them with steady signals, making sure they stayed close together. At last, they reached a chamber that felt different from the rest. It was round, with a high ceiling that allowed sunlight to pour in through a wide crack. The walls were smoother, and in the center stood a platform of polished stone. On the platform lay a sealed door of heavy slabs decorated with more symbols. The explorers floated around it in awe. The door looked untouched by time. It seemed to guard something important, something the pharaoh had meant to protect for ages. Lena's heart beat quickly. She pointed to the carvings on the door. They showed water flowing into sand and sand rising into the sky. Above it, a line of stars shone brightly. The meaning was clear. This was not just another chamber. This was the heart of the palace. Rami motioned for them to pause. They could not open the door today. It would take time, care, and respect. For now, they would record what they had seen and return another day prepared. The explorers left the round chamber slowly, their lights dancing across the murals as they passed. The palace did not feel empty. It felt like it was watching them, waiting for them to understand its story. When they surfaced once more, the sun was high and the sea was calm. They pulled themselves into the boat, their faces glowing with amazement. "We have seen the chambers of the pharaoh," Hannah said, her voice full of wonder. "He built not only for his people, but for the future." Omar nodded. "Every wall carries a lesson. We must return, for the sealed door is still waiting." Lena gazed back at the horizon. "The palace is alive," she whispered. "It holds not riches, but wisdom. The pharaoh left his voice for us to hear." Rami looked at his friends and spoke firmly. "Then we will return. We are not only explorers now. We are keepers of his story." The waves carried the boat back toward the town, while beneath the surface the palace of the pharaoh stood silent, guarding its secrets in hidden chambers. The explorers could not stop thinking about the sealed chamber they had discovered. The image of the heavy stone door decorated with stars, waves, and sand filled their minds day and night. They knew it was the heart of the palace, the place where the pharaoh's true secret had been kept for centuries. Rami called the group together in their study room. Maps of the coastline and sketches of the palace were spread across the table. The air was filled with excitement, but also with quiet respect. "We cannot rush," Rami said firmly. "The sealed chamber is not to be forced open. It was built to protect something important. If we approach it with care, we may learn what the pharaoh wished to pass on." Hannah agreed. She had spent hours copying the symbols from the murals into her notebook. The pharaoh built this palace as a message. He wanted his words to survive. "I believe the chamber holds his final teaching." Omar leaned over the table, pointing to their sketches. "The door is heavy, but the carvings show balance between sand, water, and stars. I think there may be a hidden mechanism. The door may not need to be broken. It may need to be understood." Lena smiled softly. "That is exactly what the pharaoh wanted. He wanted people to learn, not to destroy." They spent several days preparing. They studied every drawing, every symbol, and every pattern. They borrowed stronger lights and more ropes to guide their way. They also carried small brushes and tools, not to damage but to clear away sand that might cover the designs. At last, the day came to return. The sea was calm and the sun shone brightly. The boat carried them back to the marker where the palace slept beneath the waves. With careful movements, they entered the water and followed the ropes into the hidden chambers. The palace greeted them again with silence and light streaming through cracks above. Fish swam lazily around the pillars as if they too were guardians of the past. The explorers moved deeper until they reached the round chamber with the sealed door. Rami motioned for everyone to gather around. They shone their lights across the carvings. The images were clear. Waves flowing into dunes, dunes rising into stars, and stars shining over water. Beneath the pictures were smaller symbols that looked like instructions. Omar studied them carefully. He brushed away a thin layer of sand from the base of the door. "Here," he signaled. "There are grooves in the stone. They look like channels for water." Hannah moved closer. "If water flows into these grooves, it may shift the slabs," she realized. The Pharaoh used the sea itself as the key. The explorers worked together, guiding water into the grooves with careful movements. Slowly, the sand cleared and the channels filled. A deep vibration passed through the chamber as the heavy slabs began to shift. The door did not break. It moved with quiet grace as though it had been waiting for this moment. With steady effort, the slabs slid apart, revealing a passage into the inner chamber. A soft glow filled the space, not from sunlight but from the crystals embedded in the walls. They had been placed there long ago, designed to catch and reflect even the smallest light. The explorers entered with awe. The chamber was dry, protected by layers of stone that kept the seawater out. In the center stood a raised platform. On it rested several crystal cases, each holding scrolls made of a material that had resisted time. The cases shimmered softly as if guarding the words within. Lena's eyes filled with wonder. "These are the Pharaoh's writings," she whispered. "They have waited for us all this time." Rami stepped closer but did not touch the cases. He looked at the group and said, "This is his gift. Not jewels, not gold, but wisdom. His voice has reached across centuries." Hannah carefully opened her waterproof notebook and began to copy the symbols carved into the walls of the chamber. They repeated the same message again and again. Respect water as life, respect sand as time, respect stars as guidance. The Pharaoh had left not only scrolls but also reminders carved into stone. Omar studied the scrolls through the crystal cases. He noticed drawings among the writings. They showed farming techniques, ways to measure the stars, and designs for irrigation that used both desert wells and sea channels. The Pharaoh had not only written about philosophy, he had recorded knowledge that could help people live in harmony with nature. The explorers spent hours in the chamber, recording every detail. They knew they could not carry the scrolls out yet. They had to prepare a safe way to protect them from the water. But even without opening the cases, they had already received the Pharaoh's secret. The secret was simple but powerful. Wisdom is greater than wealth, and balance is greater than power. When their time ran short, they left the chamber with deep reverence. The slabs closed slowly behind them, sealing the chamber once again. It was as if the palace had accepted their visit and now asked them to return when they were ready. When they surfaced, the sky was painted in soft colors of evening. The explorers sat in the boat, silent and thoughtful. The waves rocked them gently, carrying them toward the shore. At last, Lena spoke. "The Pharaoh trusted us. He trusted that one day people would come not to take but to learn." Omar nodded. "And now it is our duty to share his wisdom." Hannah looked at her notebook filled with sketches and notes. "His words will not be lost again," she said. Rami gazed back at the horizon where the sea touched the desert. "The Pharaoh's secret is no longer hidden," he said firmly. "It belongs to humanity." The ocean rolled calmly behind them as if the waves themselves agreed. The palace had given up its greatest treasure, not of gold but of knowledge. The morning sun reflected off the calm waters as the explorers prepared to leave the palace for the day. They had seen the Pharaoh's hidden chamber and glimpsed the wisdom preserved inside. Their hearts were full of wonder, but their minds were focused on one important task: bringing the discovery safely to the surface and protecting it for the world to see. Rami checked the diving gear carefully, ensuring everything was in order. "Today we will take samples and record everything we can," he said. "We cannot carry too much at once, but every note, sketch, and crystal case we can photograph or copy will help us preserve the Pharaoh's message." Hannah prepared waterproof notebooks and brushes. Omar packed extra markers and ropes. Lena carried a small camera to capture the carvings and murals inside the chambers. Together they moved with quiet determination, aware that every action could affect the delicate structures beneath the sea. They descended carefully along the path marked with ropes from their previous dives. The stone pillars greeted them as before, rising like silent guardians from the seabed. The sunlight streaming through cracks above gave a golden glow to the entrance of the palace. Fish swam gracefully around them, almost guiding the explorers toward the inner halls. Inside, the palace felt alive once more. The murals glimmered in the filtered light, and the carvings told the story of a pharaoh who had sought harmony between desert and sea. The explorers moved slowly, recording every detail. Hana copied symbols on her waterproof notebook, tracing each curve carefully. Omar photographed carvings with precision, making sure to capture the colors and shapes accurately. When they reached the sealed chamber, Rami signaled them to pause. The slabs of stone were as they had left them, quiet and protective. He carefully guided a small channel of water along the grooves to slightly shift the stones. The door moved just enough to reveal the glow of the inner chamber. Inside, the crystal cases shimmered softly. The scrolls were untouched, preserved perfectly in their crystal containers. Lena took photographs of each case, capturing the intricate designs and carvings. Hana sketched diagrams and symbols that could not be photographed clearly. Omar checked the surrounding walls for additional carvings that might explain the Pharaoh's teachings. The explorers realized that the palace was not only a tomb, but also a school of knowledge. Every mural, every carving, and every scroll was meant to teach future generations about balance, respect, and wisdom. The Pharaoh had thought carefully about how to leave his message for people who would come after him. Carefully, they cleared sand and debris from the surrounding areas without touching the walls too much. Rami reminded the group to move slowly and speak softly. The palace had waited for centuries, and it deserved respect. After several hours, they had recorded as much as they could in one dive. They left small markers to guide them for future visits. The slabs of the sealed chamber slid back into place, protecting the scrolls once more. On the surface, the explorers rested in the boat. The sun had climbed higher, and the ocean reflected its warmth. Hana looked at her notebooks, now full of sketches and notes. "We have preserved the Pharaoh's words for the first time in centuries," she said softly. Omar smiled. "And we will return," he said. "There is still more to explore, more to understand. But today we have shown that wisdom can survive, even under the sea." Lena gazed toward the horizon where the dunes met the waves. "The town must know," she said. "The Pharaoh's palace is not just ours to discover. It belongs to everyone who wants to learn from it." Rami nodded. "Yes, we will share it carefully," he said. "Not just for curiosity, but to honor the Pharaoh's message. Knowledge is the true treasure here." Back in the town, the explorers met with scholars and elders. They showed photographs, sketches, and notes from the palace. The elders, including Yusef, were amazed to see the details of the submerged chambers. Scholars examined the symbols and began to understand the careful wisdom preserved in stone and scrolls. The town gathered to hear the explorers' story. Children listened with wide eyes, and adults nodded with respect. Everyone understood that the discovery was more than history. It was a lesson in patience, curiosity, and respect for nature and knowledge. Hana spoke to the crowd. The Pharaoh did not leave gold or jewels. He left something far more valuable. He left his wisdom for all of us to learn. The palace teaches us to respect water, sand, and stars. It reminds us to live in harmony with the world around us. Omar added, "We must protect this place and the lessons it holds. This is our duty, and the duty of everyone who learns from it." Lena looked at the ocean as the sun began to set. "The palace waits beneath the waves," she said quietly. "It will continue to teach those who are patient and curious enough to listen." Rami smiled. "And we will be its guardians for now. The Pharaoh trusted us to carry his message. We must not fail him." As the town absorbed the story, the explorers felt a deep sense of accomplishment. The Pharaoh's secret had been brought to the surface not as treasure but as knowledge. The waves lapped gently against the shore as if agreeing that wisdom, once shared, could guide humanity for generations to come. Months had passed since the explorers had first entered the Pharaoh's submerged palace. The town had grown quiet but proud, knowing it held the gateway to a secret that had waited centuries. Scholars and visitors came from distant lands, eager to learn from the murals, carvings, and scrolls preserved beneath the waves. Rami, Hana, Omar, and Lena had become guides, not just for the palace, but for the wisdom it contained. They showed newcomers how to approach the chambers with care and respect, explaining the meaning behind the Pharaoh's teachings. The palace had become more than a discovery. It had become a symbol of what humanity could achieve when curiosity and respect guided their actions. One morning, the explorers returned to the shoreline to check the markers they had placed on the palace. The desert wind was soft, carrying grains of sand that glittered in the sunlight. The ocean shimmered, calm and inviting, as if acknowledging their return. Hana pointed toward the buoy that marked the entrance. "It is beautiful to see it again," she said. Not just the palace, but the way the ocean and desert meet. It reminds us of the Pharaoh's vision, Omar agreed. He wanted us to see the balance between land and water. The palace is alive in his message, Rami smiled, and it belongs to everyone who is willing to listen. They prepared their diving gear once more, moving slowly and carefully as they descended beneath the waves. The stone pillars greeted them, familiar and welcoming. They followed the path to the palace and entered the chambers, now confident in their understanding of the space. The murals seemed brighter this time, the sunlight catching the details that had once been hidden by coral and sand. The scrolls in their crystal cases glimmered softly, as if pleased to be seen. The explorers moved through the halls with quiet reverence, their hearts filled with wonder. Lena floated to the sealed chamber, observing the slabs of stone that protected the Pharaoh's most treasured secrets. She remembered the first time they had opened it, and the thrill of discovering the wisdom that had waited for so long. "It is amazing," she whispered. He thought of every detail, every symbol, every story. It is a gift for all of humanity. Back on the surface, visitors had gathered along the shore to watch the explorers return. Children waved and elders nodded in respect. The town had become a place of learning and curiosity, a home for those who valued knowledge above all else. Rami spoke to the group. The Pharaoh left his palace not to show power, but to teach. His message is simple: respect nature, seek wisdom, and live in harmony with the world. Today we share this lesson with everyone. Hannah added, "We have learned that treasure is not measured in gold, but in understanding. The palace teaches us patience, care, and respect for the past. It is a gift for anyone willing to listen." Omar nodded. "The Pharaoh's legacy is now our legacy too. We are responsible for protecting it, learning from it, and sharing it with the world." Lena looked at the horizon where the dunes met the ocean. The palace waits beneath the waves, but its message is everywhere. It lives in our hearts, in the town, and in everyone who seeks knowledge. As days passed, the news of the submerged palace spread far and wide. Scholars from distant lands came to study the murals and scrolls. Students visited to see how the Pharaoh had balanced life between desert and sea. Visitors marveled at the harmony of the chambers, the careful carvings, and the wisdom preserved in stone and crystal. The town grew into a place of learning. Simple tools, careful observation, and respect for history became its new values. People understood that the Pharaoh had not left a treasure of wealth, but a treasure of knowledge meant to guide humanity. The explorers watched with pride as families, students and travelers walked along the shore, listening to stories of the Pharaoh and the palace beneath the ocean sands. The town had become a living museum, not of gold and riches, but of wisdom and human achievement. One evening, as the sun set behind the dunes, Rami, Hannah, Omar, and Lena stood together on the beach. The ocean reflected the warm colors of the sky, and the gentle wind carried the scent of salt and sand. Rami spoke quietly. "We were chosen to find this palace because we were ready to listen. The Pharaoh trusted us, and we have done our best to honor his trust," Hannah nodded. "And now the palace is no longer a secret. Its message is for the world," Omar smiled. "Knowledge is alive. It grows when shared, and it never fades." Lena gazed at the horizon, her eyes reflecting the light of the setting sun. The Pharaoh's vision was not only for his people, but for everyone who seeks understanding. We are all part of his story now. As the waves lapped gently against the shore, the palace beneath the ocean sands remained silent, patient, and eternal. It had given its greatest gift to humanity, and in the hearts of those who discovered it, its wisdom would continue to shine forever. The story of the Pharaoh's submerged palace became a lesson to all who heard it. The greatest treasure of humanity is knowledge, respect, and the courage to seek the truth.